Welcome back. I know I said Foundry Beta 6 was coming next, but bit of a change of plans. Just going to have a quick look at this one, or not a quick look when I see the length the video's actually going to. So this is ONS-Desertification, which I think probably wins the title for the worst name of the things I've done. It just doesn't roll off the tongue in the slightest. And I have a lot to say about this map, which isn't directly about the map, more the context in which I've created and kind of what this map means to me. But that's in the later part of the video. I don't have that much to say about this. It's a pretty simple map, unremarkable, very standard. I said if Foundry was an attempt to break the mould of Onslaught, this was reinforcing it. And there's nothing wrong with my kind of conventional standard map, I guess. It's just... there's just not much to it. It's very typical, just terrain, little decorations here, all standard assets that came with the game. There's nothing particularly ambitious about any of this. And again, that's not necessarily a criticism, it's just okay, so I said I haven't actually played this in any capacity since 2008 or something like that, so okay, that takes you across. There's a turret, and that teleporter takes you back. Makes sense. I'm not really sure about the design of this either. I mean, the kind of gameplay features. It's not very far from the base up to this node, and there's quite a kind of big sight line here. You can't see directly to the core or the spawn points, but that's still not necessarily great. Same with, you can technically see across to that node there. I've put in enough fog that's supposed to be kind of hard. But yeah, you probably could just sit here and snipe each other across the map, which isn't exactly great either. It'd be one thing, what there should really be is a wall, so it's like you have a sheltered part of the node, and if for some reason you want to do a sniper fight, you can do it across there, but it wouldn't be much fun spawning and just getting immediately sniped off or whatever, so that's not great, but well. About the only attempt I made to make this map sort of interesting, I kind of dragged this concept in from the Drawbridges Devastation map, where I come across here and lower these bridges across the kind of middle canyons. And this one here is actually kind of pointless. Because if you particularly, we're on our side of the map here, so if you were there, there'd be essentially not much point in going that way when you could just go around the kind of back of that node in front of the base and across there. It'd be a shortcut, but not exactly, you know what I'm saying, not a particular point to doing it. I think this actually looks quite decent. I say that just as around the corner to these absolutely hideous rock textures here. I mean, that just looks abysmal. I mean, it's kind of a placeholder. I just wanted to get some sort of base node built up here. That's very typical. Okay, I'm just going to slap this together. Because the actual theming of these little rooms is quite... it's okay. It's just kind of quite simple decoration, but you know, nothing wrong with it. Looks okay, does the job. But yeah, the rocks outside are pretty horrific, to be honest. Yeah, just shoot these doors to come in, it's not simple. It's a very kind of boring skybox as well, it's just a fixed texture. The only slightly interesting thing is the sun texture and those high level clouds going across, and that's a terrain glitch right there. Yeah, one of the things about this map, Beta 1, which I'll splice some footage in, I'll remember to do that. Beta 1, the edge of the map was just a cliff, which is okay for a kind of first version of a map. It's not exactly very kind of interesting. Felt very claustrophobic, and it can work, but I kind of thought I wanted the map to feel less like a literal box. Now the problem is that when you have existing terrain, there's not an immediate way of making it bigger. It's kind of like a fixed size, so you either have to make the terrain basically from scratch bigger and then recreate all the hills and whatnot, which is quite a bit of effort, or you do what I did here and make another terrain outside of it and just splice it together. And that's the seam right there. The terrain on the outside has a larger element size. Actually, yeah, so it's not actually terribly visible here either, is it? No, well, you can kind of see that the terrain in the main part of the map's got pretty small, kind of quadrangle, whatever it is, size. Which makes sense because this is actually, functional terrain. You'll be driving, walking on it, etc. There's a terrain out here is much more decorative. You can go on it, but there's no need to have it in as high resolution. So that's, when I actually find the seam again, that's about the best case for a seam. That's practically invisible, which is kind of nice. There's absolutely nothing out here. It's truly just like an open void. There's an invisible wall if you go far enough out. Could be nice for kind of flanking. As I said, it avoids the map feeling completely boxed in, and it kind of helps the flying vehicles as well. So this drawbridge is the actual interesting one. And these kind of, not only buildings are just placeholders. Again, if this map went a bit further, this would have been built up in a little kind of guardhouse, shack, whatever you call it, castle, fort. I'm just going to throw off words. You know what I mean, a kind of little building to make this a bit more interesting. So the idea is that the only way to get, except for the Manta, except for the flying vehicles, the only way to get vehicles across, I think this little Scorpion one can technically go by the middle node, which we'll be getting onto at some point. The idea is that the only way you could get vehicles across was by coordinating with your team to lower these bridges and raise them again to deny the enemy from coming across, but I don't think it would really work very well. People have done this before, making maps with toggleable elements. What you'll find is players are very selfish. It's not an insult, it's just people tend to think my immediate priority is getting into the battle and kicking arse with a vehicle or whatnot. So a kind of mindset of, I've got to go and lower these bridges and raise that bridge and help my team deal with these other people raising that bridge. It doesn't really translate very well to the type of game this is. So I suspect what would actually happen is people would just completely ignore the bridges and they'd just keep the kind of vehicles on their side of the map. Or maybe both teams would say, let's just put the bridges down and completely forget about toggling them. You might as well just build them in statically rather than have these little switches. So, as I said, it was an attempt to make something slightly interesting there, even if it might not have actually worked particularly well, or people would have ignored it or just found it more frustrating. But the middle node here is something which, again, I've tried to be at least slightly interesting with. And I can't actually, I have the map off for this, you probably noticed the HUD's off, so I don't actually know which node I have to go and build to activate that node. So this is an underwater node partially. And by that I mean, so right here in the water, but when you actually come into the node, it's not. This is kind of not water, which doesn't make any sense physically. This is just a magic force field, lets you think of it that way. So I think this was trying to be kind of interesting, kind of underwater node, but also not underwater. And it's a shame I never really got to play that online, because I think that could be quite fun. And you've noticed the roof one, this is the other slight attempt to be kind of interesting, and you're supposed to be able to... Yeah, this isn't exactly a good look for this map, is it? Right, so you have to kind of control your descent. There we go. So come onto this little bridge. And that opens up the roof of the node there. So that makes it extremely vulnerable to air vehicle attacks, and obviously you could sit up here and spam down as well. And I guess there's a question is, why is this switch here? Again, maybe somebody down there would have to go up here to keep this closed. Or maybe somebody, instead of attacking the node directly, can come up here, open and close. It's at least trying to be interesting, but you can kind of debate whether or not this is needed at all, where this is the best place for this switch to actually go. But again, it's at least trying to be a little bit different. I think you can actually... Oh, that was anticlimactic. I think Yeah, so the thing with the drawbridges is you can get the Manta across without them because you can just jump in the water, and I think you could probably get some of the smaller vehicles across the middle there. It's kind of designed in such a way that this vehicle here, the Goliath tank, which is a pretty powerful vehicle but not incredibly powerful. Some people are very fond of using these, and other people not so much. This is a fairly powerful vehicle, so the only way of getting this across would be to coordinate raising and lowering the drawbridges. But again, I suspect people might just leave this on their side of the map, or just use it purely for defence on their side rather than what you're supposed to do, which is lower the bridge and get across and coordinate with your team to prevent the enemy from doing the same. And you get some slightly strange physics when you have a vehicle on the... yeah, there we go. I think it's because this is basically it's got cosmetic treads, but yeah, see, it stays there frozen until you actually get in it, and then it just, when you get in it, it reactivates the physics. I don't think the field vehicles do that. I might have to try that. This canyon is not particularly interesting either. And again, the doors are damage triggered. I think it's just to prevent direct spamming. So yeah, that's a slight problem with the bridge if you raise and lower it with the vehicle on it. But I think it affects the Goliath the worst because, it's actually a hover tank. Well, even this whole thing here, the Manta's technically got wheels. They're just invisible underneath the fans, and they kind of interact slightly differently with the terrain. Whereas I think the Goliath, I'd have to check the actual code. I think it is, even though it's a tank, it's got visible wheels like the Manta. But the physics of it is a bit kind of glitchy on these platforms, so let's actually try it with the Manta. I'm actually curious about this now. There's a problem there as well. Yeah, see, that seems pretty realistic. And I think if you actually notice this, when it goes down, see a little bounce there, so it's actually quite physically realistic. There must be a problem specific to the Goliath tank. Yeah, this terrain, this little bridge is very rough, but it's kind of good enough for what this map is. And these rocks around this little water pool look absolutely horrendous. Yeah, there's not really much to say about this. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Snowdrift and the kind of kitchen sink approach of, we're just going to put stuff in each node to a vague theme. Even if it doesn't it's not totally incoherent. It's supposed to be a kind of, well, I think the map description talked about this used to be some sort of ancient civilization, but they all died when the water dried up. That's why it's called desertification, which I think I said before is a horrible name. At least I think it is. But then again, I don't think people care about the lore of the map, and the map description care more about how it plays and how it looks, and, well, I think it looks okay, but gameplay wise I don't think this would have been anything special, which again isn't bad. Doesn't have to be special, but might be work fine as I guess you'd call it a breather map. I mean, that's basically what it was for me actually making this. I just felt a kind of urge to do something a bit more simple and conventional, which is exactly what this is. I will say, I think the terrain looks decent. Another thing about, compared to Snowdrift, it certainly feels a lot more organic. Like I said, Snowdrift was essentially a lump of terrain on a flat plain, and there wasn't much height variation. Whereas I think the terrain here, it certainly feels, this is like a proper crater, rather than just a little dip. And I think I said for Snowdrift there wasn't any very high points or very low points. Whereas this, I think you can tell just looking at it, that this is actually a decent high point. You can see across to the other hills, and that's a proper crater. And the valleys are quite deep, well, some of them are anyway. So at least in that regard, I think feels a lot more kind of organic and a bit more real terrain rather than just, well, you have to just sit there nudging it with the terrain tools, but it certainly feels a bit more organic, or whatever you want to call it. And it does all kind of blend together. I mean, it's very... There's another terrain glitch. It's very difficult to have a desert map that doesn't turn into a kind of mess of golden yellow. Same way it's difficult to have a water map that doesn't turn into a mess of blue or forest map that just blends into a mess of green. It's quite difficult to have a map to one theme which doesn't, maybe suffers from that theme too much. Kind of got away with it in Foundry because, it's a kind of industrial theme, but you've also got the night sky outside keeping it kind of interesting, whereas this is just a lump of terrain. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's right, this node is teleporter access. Isn't the spark emitter very interesting? This turret, well, I can't get in it just now because the node's not built. This would be quite a kind of commanding presence. But again, you could just turret people at these nodes, which isn't intentional. These turrets are actually pretty powerful. They're kind of glass cannons. Because they're static, they're very vulnerable to fire, but they can dish out a lot of punishment. And very high knockback as well, so yeah, I think that would be a problem. Again, it would just take a wall around that actual node there to just prevent that. Oh, here's a corpse up here for no discernible reason, but and this looks pretty terrible as well, but yeah, there's just not, I was going to say there's not much to say about this map. I feel like I've been here forever. But been here a long time, so then there's not much to see, but I think what I might have to do is just kill myself and get back to a node with some more interesting things, go for a little drive. I think I've kind of shown off most of the nodes by now. There's nothing particularly fancy here. These little buildings, I guess you have to call them, I think look alright. But again, it's just assets that came with the game that are all designed to plug together very nicely, and that's exactly what I did. But it looks okay. This must be a teleporter that takes you up to here, and then this takes you... Yeah, that's right. You're supposed to be able to get good access to these bridge switches even if you're on foot, so the jump pads are just a kind of way of making it a little bit easier for people to do that. Same as, and by the way, these textures, the textures of these particles, those are custom, that kind of weird blue streak thing. So I'll put it on the screen. I drew that up in, I think, Project Dog Waffle. 15 years, not 15, but 12, 13 years ago this map was made. Because I just got bored of the kind of stock particles, and I thought I'll just make my own one, so there we go. But the rest of this is all just stock assets. So these kind of rock walls on the canyon look pretty meh, but the collision on them's not great either. I'll be honest, I'm getting kind of bored of going around this myself, so let's just look at it from the air. That's a good way. So these base is just a big lump of rocks, thank you. And I think this might look better if it was a kind of vague Egyptian theming, but whatever. I think it's a reasonable size of map, and again those rocks look abysmal. It's not massive, but it's not incredibly cramped either. I think it looks kind of decent. I think the colours on this are looking a little bit funny because for some reason the Unreal Editor, which I have open to load the map, kind of does something to the screen brightness. This probably looks a little bit brighter than it normally would, but it's not exactly horrendous. Yeah, so I'm just quite literally flying in circles because I've essentially completely ran out of stuff to say. You can see the terrain seem a little bit more from this vantage point, but yeah, it's I think the round's just ended. I have the HUD off, so I might be getting booted out of this vehicle in a second, but so there's obviously been a bit of effort put in this map. I don't remember work on this forever. It was not like a massive endeavour, but I've put at least a little bit of care and attention into it. Even though it doesn't look great and it's very simple and there's not much to say about it, but I don't know, maybe it would have proven a popular map, but I'm out of things to say directly about this now. What with quite literally flying in circles, so I think I'm going to just like that smoke dust effect. Keeps it kind of interesting, or not. Incidentally, one of the decisions you have to make is how high the flying vehicles can go, because you do set it in the editor. It's called a stall Z. The vehicles get above a certain height relative to the total coordinate system of the map. They can't go any higher, and you can set it really, really high. You could have it going right up into the skybox, but you have to kind of decide if it's if it's too low, it's definitely a problem, but it could arguably be a problem to have it too higher. So this feels a little bit low. I probably want the vehicles to be able to go a bit higher than this, but not too much higher. Yeah, the terrain textures are a bit so-so, but you know, it looks good enough, so I think I'm about done with this. Well, this part of it anyway. Something else to say is that there's no secrets in this map at all. I might have gotten around to putting one in had I developed it a bit further, but I guess if you become known for secrets, the secret thing to do would be not putting one in. I never played this map online, but I think it did actually get a little bit of playtime. I remember, I think it was TCP Clan had a server that played it briefly. And again, had Unreal Tournament 2004 stats not gone down, I might have actually been able to see just how much playtime it actually got. And there was some discussion about a few aspects of the map, which again has just been lost to all the forums dying, because this, what I've got on screen, is about the only one I have been able to find. So this map is quite personally significant because of the time it was built, which was pretty much exactly 13 years ago. April of 2008, I'd just turned 17. I was in my last term at school, and I guess the context this map was made in was very unique. I mean, previous maps which I'd built, I was at school, and okay, the immediate future was just more school, and ended up going to university. And the maps which I made there were, well, your immediate future is just university, and it's just more exams, studies, reports, etc. But April 2008, my future wasn't set, not at all. I had a provisional offer from university, which, as I said, I did end up going to, but nothing was set in stone. And it's quite funny, 13 years later, just thinking, that very unique situation. It's like, you know, sometimes a song, for example, will remind you of a general period in your life. You know, you have a song of a summer, for example, but other times a song reminds you of an incredibly specific moment, sometimes literally a moment in your life. And this map is kind of that to me. I always remember working on it, and here is where I worked on it. This was our kitchen table back when I lived in Edinburgh. And that's our little laptop, Dell Inspiron 9400, I think, 2GHz dual core. It wasn't bad in its day, especially for a quote-unquote gaming laptop. It wasn't really advertised as that, but I had a decent-ish graphics card. So yeah, I didn't have a fixed workstation. I was just sitting at that kitchen table, and I remember the sun being really annoying coming through the curtains sometimes just because of the direction the window was. So yeah, I sat down at that very table working on this map. I remember very clearly doing it, but also having in the back of my head, only a couple of months of school left, and after that, the future's wide open. So your feelings do get caught up in the things you make, and the thought when looking at this map, it's actually a little bit sad in a way, both that that time of my life is gone, but also that, as well as being the end of my school days, it was also the beginning of what would be a kind of difficult time for me. So that spring was, I guess I'd call it the last innocent spring, you know, the last carefree. Right now you're still at school, and you've got the summer, you've got a whole life ahead of you, basically. And trying to work on this map whilst turning all this stuff over in my head was actually quite hard. But there's no avoiding it. You know, Foundry was made a year before, basically. And at least at that time, it was okay, I can just work on this map and not be worrying about the future beyond, you know, the next exam, because there's nothing you can do about it. But making this map, realising, I said nothing was set, everything was open, so it's a little bit sad looking back on it now. Not that I'm unhappy with where I am at the moment, but as I said, never going to get that exact feeling back, and it is caught up in this map.